Can you walk us through the specifics of what the journalists discovered from the signal chat?
So he initially held this back until after the strikes in Yemen were done, which he should have. And he released part of it and said, "This is what happened. I was on this chat, da 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 da," and released part of it in publication. So then we had the back and forth action of how the administration reacted to it, and they've tried to downplay it. So he said, "No, there's more." The administration said, "Well, we don't know that there's more," and they downplayed it. In fact, in front of Congress, you had the director of national intelligence and the CIA director downplaying it. And then come Wednesday morning, he released the rest of it. And it had very explicit details. It had times, it had the type of military aircraft, it had the times the strikes were going in. It had what appears to be the beginnings of an after action report of what the damage was going to be doing and the threat assessment thereof. It had multiple packages and it actually used strike package terminology and things like that. That is important because one of the defenses that the administration has been putting out since this story first started to break was that there was no war plans. And that nomenclature inside the DoD has a very specific meaning. So think about like the famous Rainbow Five war plan. That's the two theater war plan from World War II that, ironically enough, leaked 3 days before Pearl Harbor happened. And conspiracy theorists have had fun with that ever since. That's a war plan. It's on the shelf. If this happens, this is how we're going to respond. So they're getting into the pedantic lawyerry of this is not a war plan, but it is a strike package. It is a kinetic military action. Remember that terminology from the last few years and those debates. So they were trying to kind of couch it around that. Now we have it, and it's Secretary of Defense Hegseth that is putting that information directly into Signal, which is something the DoD put out a missive just a week ago saying, no, you shouldn't be using that for official stuff. You have most of the upper echelons of this administration on this chat. This is a big old mess, and that's where we're at with right at the moment.
Now, you did briefly allude to this, but Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe yesterday in the Senate were very hesitant to share the text messages that were sent, but continue to say that no classified information was discussed in this group chat. Is there a reason that they're choosing to not share these text messages if there's nothing classified being said?
The way these hearings worked is they were briefed by the administration officials and their staff is like, what can we say? What can we not say? They were in damage control mode. And you can even tell there was a very pointed piece of testimony where you could see long pauses, especially DNI Gafford. She would sit and just kind of think really hard before answering, and you could see her doing it. That's, of course, smart because under oath means under oath, and the Senate does have oversight over them. So especially when Senator Mark Kelly was really drilling down on specifics and other senators as well, that video is out there. So now they look really bad today because it does look like they misled. Now, there was a lot of lawyery words in there. I can't recall senator is always a joke, but they were literally saying that yesterday, that sort of thing. So, whether they perjured themselves, lied, whatever terminology you want to use, will be a little bit in the eye of the beholder. They did try to couch it some, but it was very, very clear that they were briefed a very specific way on how to answer this. They knew there was more coming by the way they were answering. They were just hoping it wouldn't come out, but now it's come out, and it does look really, really bad for two of our highest rated intelligence officials to have said that in front of Congress, and then more information come out that sure looks like it contradicted it.
And how big of a national security risk is this?
Well, fortunately, nobody died in this specific incident. In fact, the real shame of this whole thing is this was a very successful military operation against some really bad people. The Houthis are just despicable terrorists. They have really messed up with international shipping. These are people that probably were a very valid target, and it was a stunning success by all accounts. But now we're going to talk about this because of the way it was handled. Now, understand the way that timeline is being laid out by Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic, if it is accurate the way he portrays it, and it sure looks like it is, these chat messages had the packages, they had the types of aircraft, they have the specific times that the strikes were going to hit, all of that before it went out. And if that information had gotten in the wrong hands, that obviously could have been catastrophic because these weren't just drone strikes. These are manned aircraft going in. You don't know what other assets are involved. Obviously, there's probably intelligence assets involved that put together this strike both on the ground and as surveillance. There's a whole web of stuff that goes into these strikes, and knowing when that strike's coming could have unraveled not only being able to shoot at those aircraft and that sort of thing, but it might have laid out information that could have led the Houthis to where some of this intelligence is coming from and put real-world assets into very high risk. This is very bad.
Well, with the information being in the wrong hands, as you just said, there's the concern right now that Witkoff is in Russia and he's using his personal phone. Is it possible that the Russians could have access to phone data?
It is possible. Now, this goes to the Russia-Ukraine stuff. Signal has been a huge part of the communication in the Russia-Ukraine war for the last 3 years. So for the last 3 years, Russia's intelligence services and they're all very capable cybersecurity folks, they've really been working on making sure they could get into Signal and mess with it because that's been a big part of that war. We have reporting from Google, of all people, that Signal is compromised in some respects, depending on it. Now, a lot of it's what we would normally call like phishing sorts of things. Somebody gets a QR code, somebody gets a link on their Signal, and then they get access to Signal through those people. But if you bounce that back to the issue at hand here, if you're putting a journalist into a group chat, which I don't see any way, although Waltz got on TV and said it got, and I'm quoting here verbatim, sucked into his phone. I would like to know how he thinks that happened. Most group chats on something like Signal, you have to have that number in your phone to add it to the chat. So he had that. So something like a phishing thing like the Russians have been doing in Ukraine to get access in the Signal, if you're accidentally putting somebody's phone number into a group chat of this magnitude with the vice president, the heads of intelligence, the secretary of defense, and all the other people that were involved, yeah, that's a very valid concern because what else are they doing? What other mistakes, as the administration's wanting to call this? These mistakes just cannot be made. And number one is you shouldn't be on Signal with any of this in the first place.
And what do you make of the way Trump has handled this situation? He called the Signal incident a minor glitch. He has kind of taken the onus off of his administration by saying that it was actually the messaging app's responsibility or its fault that these messages got leaked. What do you make of these claims?
This is exactly how you would expect Donald Trump. We are a decade into his political career now, and we're into his second term as president. You know how he was going to respond. They're going to attack the reporting. They're going to attack everybody except them. Now, remember, too, the background of this is we are only a few weeks away from the nomination fights over people like Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and a lot of these other people. And Pete Hegseth especially was an enormous political capital lift, making sure he got confirmed. And the Senate is who has oversight over a lot of this. So a lot of those senators that got their arms twisted are not going to be really happy that Hegseth has now made the administration and by extension they themselves for voting for him look bad. But Donald Trump's whole thing is I don't think he's going to throw anybody under the bus just yet. Now, if the pressure mounts, they may need to find themselves a scapegoat to try to get out of this, but I would expect nothing less from him. He's going to blame the reporting. He's going to say it's all conjured up stuff, but now we have video in front of Congress of the DNI and the CIA director. Looks like they're sure at least wordy and lawyering around the truth. That doesn't look good. We'll see what else breaks in the story as it goes forward. But so far, their response is making this worse, not making it go away as bad as they probably wish it would.
And with the responses making it look worse than it is looking better, do you see anyone being fired from this incident?
Any other administration, if you go back, and I know people will go to Hillary's emails and all the Biden stuff and all that. This is the one that's in front of us. If a lower level military person had done this, this would be at best a career killer, at worst probably criminal action taken against them. They're going to try to hold on to this as long as they can and not punish anybody, because if they punish anybody, they see that as an admission of guilt and fault. So I think they'll try to play it out as long as they can. This all falls on Congress, though, and the Republicans have majorities in both the Senate and the House, and they have the chairmanships of the committees that would do the investigations into this sort of thing. Now, to their credit, they're saying they are going to investigate it. I think that was probably just talking points yesterday. As the pressure grows, though, they may have to actually dig into this thing a little bit. That's what to watch for, is how much is Congress actually going to exert their oversight authority and put pressure on this administration, because otherwise the administration is just going to keep plowing ahead because they don't really care about the media coverage in and of itself unless it becomes politically untenable.